Okay.
Mr. Michael from actually from Abuja schools.
What school, sorry?
So can you hear me?
Yes,
Mike
yes.
Sunday from Abuja Safe and Schools.
Okay, thank you for joining. And then I see Miss Janet Simon.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, how are you? Give me 1 second. Okay, are you also from Safe Hands Schools?
I'm also from Safe Hands School, sir. Good evening.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Mrs. Joy Williams. How are you today?
Sorry, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Are you related to any Mr. Gaga that used to work for the Night Post service in Nigeria?
Yes, I am.
Really?
Sorry.
How so?
Thank you. Mute.
Sorry, you said?
Yes, I'm related to him. Sorry, my baby is a bit cranky. I need to attend to him.
Oh, no worries, no worries. We'll talk more soon. Mr. Gaga was at my church in Ekwa, Ikoyi, Lagos, and he was his family was a blessing to us long time ago. So that is wonderful.
When they were in Lagos, that's very true.
Oh, you're in Lagos too?
No, I wasn't in Lagos.
Oh, okay. So no problem. So welcome. So we'll get started here in a second. I have some paper behind me for some of the things, but if you don't mind, I think part of what I'll do, at least initially, is get an idea of what grade level you teach or what subjects you teach. And then I want to make my case as applicable to you as possible in terms of why I believe Africa is ripe for a revolution. So thank you for, again, taking time to join me. I'll probably present for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then I want to give you time to ask questions, share any objections, concerns you have. So let me just grab one more thing, and then I'll move my computer up so it's actually better to see the white paper. So let me just grab one thing for that, and we'll get started. Thank you, Elio, Joe, and Joseph. My team members have helped me with getting this going. And so thank you again, Elio, Joe, and Joseph. And I'll give Elio, Joe a chance to share a little bit more about some of what we have to offer people. But I'm excited. This is a topic that is dear to my heart, the topic of the scientific revolution. And then, of course, I grew up in Nigeria, so this is dear to my heart in terms of helping Nigerian students flourish and Nigerian teachers flourish as well. So, okay, let me grab one thing and we'll kick it off here.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. This is Amos speaking. Mr. Amos introduced me. I'm his project manager. Just give him a minute. He'll be back very, very soon. I will comment.
Oh, that's fine.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Florence Anete, the Leonardo School, Abuja.
Good evening, Mrs. Florence. It's really nice to meet you today.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. This is Joy Williams Gaga from Safe Hands Schools, Abuja.
Hello, Mrs. Joy. How are you doing? How's your baby now?
He's getting better. He'll be fine.
Okay. That's nice to hear. Okay.
Go ahead, Elio, Joe. You were touching base.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Michael. Good evening, Mr. Collins. Or I don't know what the time is in Singapore, Mr. Collins.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Welcome. It's really lovely to have everyone here today.
Yes, it's also glad joining up.
Okay.
So yes, go ahead, Elliot.
Okay, no, I wanted to give you the floor so that you can just get started and we don't waste
Okay.
anybody's time. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, welcome again, everybody. I am here in a city called Liberty, Missouri. That's where I'll be presenting from. Thank you, Dr. Colin Gan, for joining us. Dr. Colin Gan is from Singapore, and I was going to talk about Singapore a little bit. Thank
It's
you.
okay. You talk about Africa tonight, today.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Amos Tarfa. I grew up in Nigeria. Oh, and by the way, Mrs. Florence Enetie, nice to have you. And Mrs. and then Osuya, thank you. Nice to have you here too. When we get to Q&A, if you don't mind, please make sure you can tell us a little bit about, maybe what grade level you teach. But let me just give you a general overview of the discussion, and then we'll have an opportunity to go back and forth. So I'm from Nigeria, and I thank God for all the things that I was blessed with my primary school and secondary school education. I came to America for my university education, and I got my degree in chemistry and philosophy. My bachelor's degree was in chemistry, my minor was in philosophy. And I would say that one of the reasons why I was able to thrive in university in America was because of the education I received in Nigeria. In Nigeria, I went to a school called Air Force Primary School. So I went to Air Force Primary School, Victoria Island, Lagos. And before that, I grew up in Adamawa and Bauchi. And so I started in the Northeast. That's where I'm from. I'm from Adamawa State. I moved down to Lagos in 1994, and I went to Air Force Primary School, Victoria Island, Lagos. While I was at Air Force Primary School, discipline was a very important topic to the school. And I think that the environment that was created at Air Force allowed us to study hard. So when I was at Air Force Primary School, I studied hard. I loved math. I loved science. I was in the JETS Club, Junior Engineers, Technologists, and Scientists. I did presentations, and I loved science from a young age. In primary 5, I took the National Common Entrance Exam, and by God's grace, I actually scored higher than all the primary 6 students. So then I skipped to JSS 1, which is, it's common. Sometimes that happens where we jump primary 5. We don't do primary 6. We just go straight to secondary school. So that's what I did. I went straight to secondary school. And in secondary school, I went to Federal Government College, Lagos, Ijanikin, and I was blessed to have very good teachers. Part of why I am who I am today, I would say, is because of my primary school teachers, my maths teacher in primary school, my science teacher. And then in secondary school, I was blessed to have a lot of math teachers and science teachers that have influenced my life greatly. When I came to America, though, there was one thing I didn't learn as much when I was in Nigeria, and that is the topic of the history and philosophy of science. I didn't know the extent or I didn't understand how we got all the concepts that we were teaching to students or the things that we were learning in Nigeria. And if there's one thing I would do different, is that I wish Nigerian teachers would teach the history of the concepts they're teaching. And the same thing with American teachers, the same thing with Singaporean teachers. Everybody around the world should teach the history of the concepts so that students have an understanding of how they got the knowledge. Now, let me say this though, for primary school teachers, it is a little more difficult to do that for primary school teachers, because the students in primary school, sometimes they just want to learn random facts. So they might not understand the scope of the history and philosophy of science. But for secondary school students, I think that they can definitely do that. And so we're going to talk about how our organization, the Learning Institute for Excellence, is trying to disrupt education by teaching the history and philosophy of science. So why is Africa ripe for a scientific revolution? Before I answer the question of why Africa is ripe for a scientific revolution, I think it will be important to talk about the scientific revolution in the first place. And so we're going to do the best we can. I'm just going to write a date or a series of dates here that we're going to use as a reference point. The scientific revolution happened between the 1500s and about the 1700s. Between the 1500s and about the 1700s. Now, when I was in Nigeria, you had to take either science class or arts class or social science. So I never learned world history in detail. But when I was in America, I learned world history, I also learned philosophy. I also learned the history and philosophy of science. And I was blessed to begin to see the connections between science, philosophy, and all of the pieces that come together. Science, philosophy, and I had already studied theology along the way. So I knew a little bit about the Reformation, which is an interesting part to this discussion. So here's what happened. The Greeks were one of the first people to give us a very good background in mathematics. When you think of geometry, you think of the Greeks. The Greeks did a lot of the work that we talk about around 300 BC, so 300 years before Christ. The Greeks gave us a very logical book called Euclid's Elements from 300 BC to about 1400 AD. So this long period of time, life was going on. Life in Europe was going on and so on and so forth. They call it the Middle Ages. Well, actually, the Middle Ages started around 400 AD to about 1400 AD. So there's about 1,000 years. Life is going on. People are exploring. The major scientists at this time are people like Euclid. There's a famous man by the name of Euclid. Let me write his name down. So again, I apologize. I'm doing this out of my hotel because I couldn't get to my destination. We had a breakdown on the way. But anyways, here's the situation. Euclid. And then we have another guy by the name of Archimedes, and on and on. These guys did a good job of helping us understand a little bit of science. But here's where things get interesting. Around 1450, there was a man by the name of Johannes Gutenberg, and he created the printing press. Before the printing press, if you wanted a book, you had to find the book itself, and then you had to have somebody copy the book for you. What Johannes Gutenberg did was that he created a way for people to be able to duplicate books fast. And the first book that he printed was the Bible. And so this was in about 1450, okay? Notice that is before 1500. Then in the 1500s, a man by the name of Nicholas Copernicus came. Nicholas Copernicus was able to show that the Earth was not at the center of the solar system, but the sun was the center of the solar system. And therefore, everything revolved around the sun, not the Earth. Before the 1500s, there was a rumor that some people believed. Some people believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system and the sun went around the Earth. Nicholas Copernicus was able to show that the sun is the center, and this was after the time where you had the printing press. Do you see, the printing press is important because whatever ideas you had, the printing press could distribute it fast. And so the idea now that Copernicus had was that the sun was the center of the solar system. And he was afraid to say this because he was going against the paradigm at the time. In the philosophy of science, you learn this topic called the Copernican Revolution, and it happened around 1550. Around 1550, Copernicus had released his book. He released his book right before he died. Now, when you're about to die, it's easy to say anything you want. And so Copernicus allowed the world to learn about his beliefs that the sun was the center of the solar system. But he actually believed those things way before 1550. He wrote those things way before 1550, but he released it close to 1543. So he releases his book around 1543. And in 1564, there's a man by the name of Galileo Galilei who was born in Italy. So Copernicus was a Polish monk, well, I guess Polish individual, and then Galileo was an Italian. Galileo took the beliefs of what Copernicus said and he carried that on. But he also had another person called Johannes Kepler, not his colleague, but somebody else around this time. And I promise these names will stop very soon. But we have Copernicus, you have Galileo, and you have Kepler. Those are the three names to remember in this astronomical discussion. When the heliocentric view of the solar system, the belief that the sun is the center, when that got established, and we have the printing press to distribute that knowledge, my friends, this is what happened in the world. Imagine that there was gradual progress. And then you get a spike. That's what happened. We get a spike around 15 to 1700 in human knowledge. There's a spike. Why did that spike happen? There's a lot of people that have done studies on this, and this is one of the areas that I love studying. And these are the reasons why we see a spike in discovery from the 1500s and above. Number one, the printing press. The printing press laid the groundwork so that whatever you wanted to disperse to the world was readily available to be able to just go out to the world. That's number one. Number two, there was a disruption in Europe at this time called the Reformation, and that played a role. And we can talk about that later, but part of the role it played was that it allowed more people to become literate. So more people were reading, and they were reading the Bible, they were reading, they were learning. A lot of that was happening, and that has to do with some of the work of Martin Luther in Germany. The third thing that happened in 1543 is Copernicus changed the world by giving us the right view of the solar system. If you have the wrong view of the solar system, you're going to have wrong studies and wrong results. But if you have the right view of the solar system, it's going to change everything. So Copernicus changed the world. And by the way, one of the things we could talk about later that I think could help your teachers is we're making these flashcards where we basically tell the story. This is Copernicus. We tell the story by showing students the picture. And then at the back, we tell them a little bit about that particular scientist, right? So I've written a book, I'm writing a book called 12 Men That Changed the World. And this is one of the first people, Nicholas Copernicus. The other person that I've talked about so far that you guys heard me discuss is Galileo Galilei, okay? So I have Galileo and I have Nicholas Copernicus. There's one more person, let's just bring him out, and that's Johannes Kepler. And you can look up their names later. So these three men laid the groundwork for one other man that everybody knows, and that's this man. Does anyone want to take a guess who's that? So these three men laid the groundwork for this guy. And I'll give you a clue. He said, if I have seen further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants. And these are the giants that gave us this guy. Now, why is this guy important? This is Isaac Newton. Sorry, I don't expect us to remember all these faces. Don't mind me. I was thinking that everybody loves Newton like Amos. Actually, Newton is not my favorite. My favorite guy is actually over here. We'll talk about him later. But here's what happens. These three guys laid the groundwork for Newton. Now, the scientific revolution was caused by the work of a lot of work of these three guys. So how does this tie to a teacher in a primary school, for example? My hope is that we can teach African students and Nigerian students especially the history of science, the history of the people behind the concepts they're learning, so that they can maybe disrupt science in their own way. And I think that the role that all of you play, especially the primary school teachers on the call, is so critical because you guys are influencing the youth at a very young age. You are getting them to learn how to think better and be curious. And so I want to thank you for what you do. As I said, I am what I am today, partly because of people like Mr. Essien at Air Force Primary School, partly because of Mrs. Bello in Air Force Primary School. And so all of those people, and here's the thing, sometimes you might wonder, is my work actually making an impact? And the answer is yes. It might not look like it right now, but your work is making an impact because you're giving the kids the building blocks that they're going to put their future concepts on. And so primary school is the most important element of building that solid foundation. So is there a way that we can support and give primary school teachers resources so that they can inspire their students to become the next generation of Isaac Newtons and Galileos and Keplers and Newtons and so on and so forth? So the scientific revolution happened partly because of this Copernican revolution, which happened around 1543. Galileo comes and he takes it to the next level. Galileo dies in 1642. Isaac Newton comes and the rest is history. But this shows you a little bit of how the world was ripe for a scientific revolution because they had the right view of the solar system. Now let's talk about Africa. Some of the brightest students in the world are in Africa. They have very good teachers and a very good foundation. The problem, though, as I said, is some of them don't understand the story of science. They don't see the context of how we got to where we are. And if they were to grasp that context, my hope is that they can collaborate with their friends who might be in Africa or outside Africa, but they can collaborate. And by collaborating, because they have a solid foundation. So I repeat, Africa provides a better K-12 foundation than America in math and science. Let me say it one more time. Africa, and Nigeria especially, provides a better science and math education as far as rigor and fluency than America. So they have that part down. And I'm not saying this carelessly. I teach in America, and I've worked here for many years. And I see that America is lacking in the fundamentals. Nigeria is not lacking in the fundamentals. We are strong on the fundamentals. What we need is inspiration to take our kids to the next level. What is that inspiration? Let's go back to the scientific revolution and let's look at the people that have changed the world. Let's tell our children those stories, and let's tell our children that they can change the world and they can actually do that. How can they do that? Well, the reason why these people did what they did was because they had a curiosity to understand the world that God had made. They had a curiosity to understand, why does the solar system work this way? I want to understand it, not because I want to pass a state test, but because I actually want to understand the universe. Imagine if we can give our students more of a vision for just understanding for understanding's sake, not because of the National Common Entrance Exam, not because of any state standards, but simply because they want to understand the beauty of the universe. Simply because they want to solve practical problems. Let me give you one example. Dr. Colleen Gann and I and the team at Life's Learning Institute for Excellence, we're going to be doing a project. And that project has to do with water purification. What if we tell people, we want you to make clean drinking water using your knowledge from chemistry, physics, and math. And we will connect you with people in America and Singapore and India and Australia who also have a desire to do the same. So take your solid understanding of math and science and bring it into the context of creating clean water. Now you're solving a problem and you're using the knowledge that you've gained to solve the problem. Let me give you a very practical example, and then we'll take some questions and answers and go back and forth. When we're driving to an event in the state of Minnesota. So I live in Texas, which is in the southern part of the United States, and Minnesota is in the northern part of the United States. So we were driving up for the celebration of life of my grandmother-in-law, who passed away this week. And what happened was the car had a problem. The car works fine, but there was a problem that came about that made the engine stop for whatever reason. So we had to stop, and then we had people look at it, and they were able to find out the problem. But here's what's interesting. Before this happened, if you had told me, hey, Amos, do you want to learn about the water pump in a car? I would have told you, I'm not really interested right now. But when my car needs a water pump, now I'm trying to understand how the water pump works because it matters to me right now. When something matters to you, you go the extra mile to figure it out. The reason why Oxford and Cambridge and MIT and some of these top universities became pretty good at what they do is because they were solving problems, or they had people that were attending the school who loved learning for learning's sake. So when Oxford and Cambridge, which were around, by the way, during the scientific revolution, Isaac Newton went to Cambridge. When these schools were getting students in the 15 and 1600s, the students were not attending those universities because they wanted to pass their state standards. No, they were going there because they wanted to learn about the world. They really cared. Unfortunately, today, many students just want to get a grade. They don't really care. So how do you get someone to really care? Show them how the content matters to them. So for me right now, water pumps matter to me because I need to understand what's going on with the car. My children were saying the same thing this morning. They were like, oh, now we care more about this topic because it matters. So then I told them, I always like bringing things back to education. I said, isn't that interesting? If you have a student that is trying to learn something, but they don't have a reason for learning it, then there's a problem. And that's why you notice that in my books, one of my workbooks that I've put together called Counter to Calculus, I have a rocket here. And the idea is I'm telling people, if you want to build a rocket, you need to know math, chemistry, physics, engineering, and computer science. So you learn math and all of these things to build a rocket. You don't just learn it just to learn it. Now, in elementary school, you need to learn it all because you need those tools. Without elementary school, you can't go far. Let me finish with a quick analogy. I said I was going to talk about Singapore for a second. But the reason why I want to talk about Singapore is because they have a very good rigor in their elementary school, just like Nigeria. However, Elon Musk would say that you shouldn't just give somebody nuts and tools and wrenches. You should tell them to build something with it. That's where I think education needs to go. Modern education needs a new paradigm that inspires students to care, that inspires students so that when they're on holiday, they're talking to their friends saying, hey, do you want to come to my house and do some math problems so that we can solve a problem that involves this or that? Like, imagine if students love learning just for learning's sake, not because of any state standards, but because they love learning. If they love learning, it will transfer to their class grades and they will do better in their grades because they're actually learning for learning's sake. So why is Africa right? Because Africa has the foundational skills. Africa has the foundational skills. Where do we have challenges in Nigeria, for example? It's in the infrastructure. So one way we can try to deal with this is we need to increase our collaboration, and the Learning Institute for Excellence, or LIFE LLC, we want to do that. We want to partner with schools in Nigeria and connect them to people in America and Singapore and India that can give them the support, whether it's mentoring or different collaboration opportunities, so that the children don't have their dreams dying because of an infrastructural challenge of a nation or continent. My parents live in Nigeria. Again, I grew up in Nigeria. I understand some of the challenges. Some of our team members live in Nigeria, and we want to make an impact. But I think part of where it begins is we need to teach people how we got to where we are now. So I apologize. Let me say this. If you look at the history of math and science, the greatest mathematicians who've ever lived, and you can see it in a book like this called Journey Through Genius. The greatest mathematicians, this is a math history book, the greatest mathematicians who ever lived, most of them all lived in the 1700s, like all of them. Nobody today is anywhere close to Isaac Newton, Leonard Euler, or Carl Friedrich Gauss. But I believe we need to raise the next generation of Isaac Newtons, Carl Friedrich Gauss. We need to raise the next generation of some of the best mathematicians and scientists, and Nigeria can do it. Nigeria can do it. And with the primary school teachers giving the students a solid foundation on their math and science and English, and then adding a little bit of the history of science in there as best as we can, and we are more than willing to help in any way we can, your students will go to secondary school with a bigger vision for life, with a bigger vision for science, knowing that they can change the world. There's a lot more I want to say, but I better stop and hear thoughts, comments, objections. Let me give Eliojo a second. Eliojo, if you wanted to share a little bit, and then please, the floor is open for questions, answers, and discussion.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Amos. That was a really wonderful session. I also learned a lot, even though I get to hear Mr. Amos speak all the time about this topic. So I basically know this presentation by heart. But one thing I will say is that the team at Life is very, very passionate about what we do. We're very passionate about training teachers and ensuring that teachers are able to carry on the mission of making STEM education such a big thing in Africa that we get Isaac Newtons and other great scientists from the students that you're teaching currently, even at the grade level that they are. We are, Mr. Amos, he spoke about counting to calculus, but he didn't really give much info about it. And what Mr. Amos didn't say is that he spent 12 years creating the best math curriculum that currently exists. And what he did was that he put together all of his experience teaching math and physics and science and created a course that teaches students the full calculus course up to, let's say, when they're in SS1 or SS2. So by the time they reach SS3, they are starting college courses. That is how passionate Mr. Amos is about his work. He has spent a lot of time building and perfecting this that he wants to share with all of us now. So I think I'll open up the floor to any questions. If you have any questions about what we just spoke about, I think now would be the best time for us to start the Q&A session. So does anyone want to go first? Oh, Ms. Amos, you have something to say?
They can also type it in the chat box.
Okay, yes, you
Okay.
can also type it in the chat box.
One thing I will mention as we get the questions coming is that I want to give you guys a quick example of, so after the 1700s, great scientists, of course, have come. But in 1821, between 1821 and 1831, there was a man by the name of Michael Faraday. I'm going to type his name in the chat box, Michael Faraday. So I'm going to give a few names, and then please go ahead with questions. So let's see. So I've written Michael Faraday. So Michael Faraday did work with electricity and magnetism. And it's because of Michael Faraday that we have a lot of advancements in electricity today. But what people don't know is that Michael Faraday only had a primary school education. Let me phrase it this way. The greatest experimental physicist of all time was a primary school educated man. That was his education. So somehow he got a solid foundation enough that till today, everybody salutes Faraday. Like that's how good he was at what he did. So primary school teachers, I know there's a lot of you on the call. Thank you for what you do. And we want to support the work you do again in trying to give you regular encouragement and support in the history of science, in the history of math, and how you can tell it to your students in a fun and engaging way using things like these flashcards, which I'll send a sample set to your to the principal at Safe Schools. Is that how you say it? Is this safe? Sorry, I hope I said it correctly. But I hope that you guys can tell them the stories and tell them that, for example, James Clerk Maxwell, when he was in elementary school, he was already thinking about different ideas, and he was able to explore taking his knowledge to a higher level. So let's say you have a primary school student in primary 4 that loves science a lot. Safe Hand Schools, sorry, Safe Hand Schools. Yeah, let's say you have a primary school student that loves science a lot, and you feel like as a teacher, I don't know if I have enough to give this student. I want to give them more, but I don't know what else to give them. Tell them to reach out to Life. You know, we will give them the tools and get them thinking, because sometimes people in primary 3, primary 4, primary 5 are already thinking about big topics. And so we have physicists, we have chemists, we have people that we want to begin to connect students with to get them thinking on a different level. So imagine if in Nigeria, we can come up with a solution for electricity from a student, like they come up with a good solution to help with the electricity problems and help power villages and power supply. But our first project is water purification. That's our first project. So we're going to be working on water purification starting in January. We're going to turn our attention. We're going to bring students from Nigeria and all over and say, how can we solve this problem so that every Nigerian child has clean water? While we are finding a solution to the problem, they will learn chemistry, physics, economics, business, entrepreneurship. This is called like project hands-on learning in interdisciplinary studies. Now, I know you have elementary school students. They might not be thinking there yet, but let's help them. Let's supplement your education for the elementary. That's what I think I could see us do. Now, my question for you guys is there any other way we can support your work as primary school teachers or secondary school teachers in seeing Africa give rise to the next generation of best mathematicians?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Tarfa. Thank you. That was very educative and informative. I just have a question. I wanted to know, how do you intend to collaborate with schools to help with the materials? Are you going to come in to like educate the teachers, or will you be coming in once in a while to engage with the kids? How do you intend to do that? And is it going to be a one-off thing, or would you be coming in? Is it monthly, or how do you intend to keep up that work with schools that you're collaborating with?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that, first of all, we're going to establish more and more like webinars, so at least we can have continuing education for teachers. And Mr. Joseph, part of our team here, has worked on our certificates that we're going to create a series of these certificates. And basically, there's a certificate for like today's event of just showing that you've had a chance to learn a little bit of the history of the philosophy of science and the history of science. And so that's number one. We want to provide a continuing education structure for teachers so that you can tell people, I attended this event, right? And again, let me just say this. I was just at Cambridge University in August this year. And, you know, in life, it's just so interesting how, you know, how God blesses us with opportunities. How does a boy from Yola, Adamawa State, right, end up in Cambridge University listening to one of the top philosophers of science and sociologists of science? Like, that was my story. It's a blessing, and I praise God. I bring that up because, you know, the topic that one of the professors taught at Cambridge when I was there was actually some of what my research was. He came and he's published a lot of books, and he kept saying some of the same ideas that we are talking about right here. And so the reason why I bring this up to you guys is because you are listening indirectly to lectures from Cambridge University right now. Like, you are listening indirectly from Cambridge. Now, why is that important? Cambridge University is the home to the top physicists and mathematicians that have ever lived. And we have been able to go there. We went to Cambridge, we went to Newton's house, we've studied their lives, and we're bringing those nuggets and we're bringing it to teachers and saying, look at what it takes to raise the generation of Newtons and Einsteins and Eulers. And so I want to tell these stories, and I'm going to keep telling it on my YouTube channel, which if somebody on my team, please, if you don't mind, Joseph or May Nasara, thank you for joining. And Elia Joe, if one of you can just pull up the Counting to Calculus YouTube and just post one of the videos in the comment section. So teachers, this is one way you can continue following our work, is our YouTube channel, because we'll keep posting training for teachers there. But I would love to do a quarterly meeting with teachers. So like, this is November, right? So by God's grace, next year in February, January, February, and March, I would like to do another meeting with teachers. I want people to bring, what are the challenges you're facing in your job? What are the ways that we can support you? Let's see. So that's number one, is let's look at ways that we can keep the dialogue. So let's say you go back to school tomorrow, you teach something, and the students are saying, excuse me, sir, I don't understand. Like, why are we learning about prime numbers? You tell them, okay, I have Euclid's flashcard, and prime numbers comes from Euclid, by the way. Sorry, I got excited with prime numbers. Let me calm down. Sorry, let me calm down. Prime numbers are beautiful, right? But who came up with prime numbers? Why do we teach prime numbers? Do you know that without prime numbers, we have serious problems in society? We don't have encryption. We don't have network security. We don't have a lot of other topics in math. But the guy who came up with prime numbers was Euclid. That Greek mathematician I told you about in the beginning that wrote a book in 300 BC. He wrote the book about 2,000 years ago and talked about prime numbers, and that's what we teach in primary schools today. When you talk about the highest common factor, HCF and LCM, that's Mr. Euclid. Thank you, Mr. Euclid, you know? So these are the things that I want you to bring to the meeting and tell us, we're struggling with trying to explain this to the kids. They don't understand, or they don't see the history. So this movement involves your input. Any challenges you have, you bring it. My team will research and see how we can better provide education in science and mathematics. So quarterly, I would love to do a webinar for teachers, at least about quarterly. I have staff members in Nigeria that I would love to introduce to the schools. So if they ever want somebody to come into their schools. Once a year, I would love to do an annual conference on STEM excellence. And I would love to do that in August, hopefully. And I want to invite all of you, and your friends, and we would get together. Maybe at, I don't know, we have to beg Nikon, or what's it called, Transcorp, to host us. But let's get together and let's brainstorm how to advance math and science education in Nigeria, not at the level of a standard, but at the level of the best. Do you see what I'm saying? We want the students to be the best. So if you want somebody to be the best soccer player, you introduce them to Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. let's introduce our students to the best mathematicians that have ever lived. So quarterly meetings, an annual meeting that would bring us all together in person, host all of you, have discussions, share with you the research in the field, invite my friends to come along. And then let's pray that God provides. Maybe Elon Musk will give us a call. If we have a jet, why don't we bring all of you to Cambridge? Why don't I show you the place where Isaac Newton did his work on gravity? Why don't I show you the place where Maxwell did his work on electromagnetism? Why don't I show you where Michael Faraday's office is in London? That's the next level. So if people are praying, we could pray for that next level. That's where we now go to the place, and then we get inspired, and we come back and we inspire our kids to start thinking like Maxwell, to start thinking like Faraday, to start thinking like Newton. By the way, what I'm about to say is a fact. This is not my opinion. It's a fact. The three greatest mathematicians, according to many other mathematicians today, the three greatest mathematicians that have ever lived were Isaac Newton, Carl Friedrich Gauss, and Leonhard Euler. Those are the three greatest mathematicians. The three greatest physicists that have ever lived are Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton, and James Clerk Maxwell. Do you notice that Isaac Newton is in the two sets of names I mentioned? That brings me to a very important point, and then I'll take other questions. Notice that the best mathematicians also had a strong background in science in many ways, of the old mathematicians. The best physicists were also very good in math and science. That's because there's a connection between math and science. There's a connection. So we provide training for teachers and consultancy. We provide, again, teaching, continuing education. We provide classroom stories for your students. We can come to the classrooms. Your principal can let us know what works, or the classroom teacher can talk to the principal and invite us in. But I am more than willing to keep doing these webinars and be a resource as much as possible. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so you answered a question that was resonating in my heart already in the talk, but I just want to add, at the start of this session, I teach maths and science. I love to make it engaging, and I love to let them know that they need to always think and talk like mathematicians and scientists and all of that.
Yeah.
But my question is, do you have okay, so I had always longed for a revamp in our curriculum. So do you have like should I call it a free opportunity where you get to help schools revamp their curriculum so that we can
Yes.
infuse these things? And
Oh, sorry, can you go ahead?
does it come at a cost, or is it part of your service to humanity so that we get to know all of these things? Because I'm really, really excited about this.
So let's put it this way. People can choose whatever they need from our services. Let me list them. Actually, Leo Joe was going to list them as well, but I'll just mention a few things here. So we provide teacher training and professional development, part of what we're doing right now, a webinar. We also provide consultation for families that want to have their kids go to school in America and so on. But number three, we provide curriculum overview. So what I did was I took the whole American math curriculum, the whole thing, all the textbooks I could find, and I extracted every single math topic that you teach to a child, every topic. So if you tell me what topic you're working on right now, I have a list of all the topics we teach kids from counting to calculus, and I basically can tell you where you are on your journey to calculus. Now, let me actually answer a question somebody might not have asked, but it might be thinking about. Why is Amos saying everybody should do calculus? Why does calculus matter? Calculus matters because it's a key to many doors. Calculus opened the door. Newton disrupted science like never before. Not just Newton, there was another guy called Leibniz. Newton and Leibniz changed the world by discovering calculus. So calculus is a tool that opens doors to many tools. Every child should take calculus. Every child, I would argue, must take calculus, because without calculus, you are stuck. You don't have all the tools you need. But the beginning of calculus is learning to count and learning solid math. So I take people's curriculum for schools, and this is a service you can ask for, where I take your whole curriculum, I take all your textbooks, all of them. Like I have Nigerian textbooks, Singaporean textbooks, American textbooks. I take all the textbooks and I create a pathway from the basic to the most advanced topics. That's what I did for America. So I took the whole American math curriculum and rearranged it from basic math to advanced math. What we teach in America for 12 years can be completed comfortably in 3. What we teach in America for 12 years can be completed comfortably in 3. That's what I was able to accomplish over the last 12 years. I've created into a video course. So for example, if I met somebody today, an adult that says, Amos, I want to get a degree in engineering, but I don't know math. If they give me 3 years of their lives, they will be the best in math. And well, they'll be one of the best in calculus. Just 3 years. That's with starting with nothing. Now, if they're willing and dedicated, we could do it in a year and a half. But you're like, Amos, how is that possible? It's because math should not be taught as a disjointed list of topics. It should be taught as a story from basic math to calculus. And you don't move forward if you don't understand the previous topic. You must master every topic along the way. So we've we've created this American tool. We are bringing, again, Nigeria has a rigorous structure, but let me answer the question about how do we make it more relatable? Let me say this. When a teacher walks into the classroom and says, good morning, class, today we're going to be talking about prime factorization, or, when you want to find the lowest common multiple. But what if I start the class, instead of saying today we're doing prime numbers, what if I start the class by saying, good morning. In 300 BC, Euclid wrote this. And because he wrote this, today, when you go and you use your credit card, to buy things, it's because of Euclid. Now the kids are like, wait, you're telling me that the reason why my parents were able to buy my food yesterday with their card is because of Euclid? Yes. Because prime numbers are used for credit card encryption and security. Now the students are scratching their heads understanding, you are telling me that the knowledge of Euclid in 300 BC can affect me today. You're telling me that I can come up with ideas that can help people tomorrow. Yes, you can. This student, you can do it. A lot of students think of knowledge as static, like we've mastered everything we need to know and there's nothing new to learn. They can come up with better ideas. There are so many math problems that have not been solved. Why are our students not introduced to those problems? Funny story, and then I'll take another question. A guy came late to a class one day. He came to class, he sat down, he opened his notebook, he looked on the board, and he wrote the problem on the board. And because he thought it was a homework problem, he just wrote it down, and then he listened to the lecture and he went home. When he was at home, he kept working on the problem. It was a very difficult problem. And finally, he finished. And he went to his professor. This part of the story, I'm just going to summarize. But he went to his professor and basically he's like, sorry, I'm late with my homework. Here's my solution. The teacher looked at him and said, that wasn't a homework problem. That was an unsolved problem. Nobody has solved it. Like the teacher wrote it on the board because this student was late. Remember, he was late. So he thought it was a homework problem. So he solved it. And then he showed the teacher. And the teacher says, nobody has solved this problem. But you have. And now that problem got published and the rest is history. Guys, imagine if you tell people that they can do it and then you give them the tools. So let me answer the question of infrastructure. How do we deal with infrastructure? In Africa, we have the challenge of electricity and so on and so forth. What we need to do is if students have network, if they have any network ability, why are they not connecting with some of the live students in in America and Singapore to collaborate on projects and work on those projects? And maybe the students in Nigeria, let's say a student in Kaduna lives in a community where there's no clean water, and they present the problem to students in America and Singapore and India, and we all work on the problem together, and then the student in Nigeria will test the devices that we try making, and then we see progress. So I feel like our collaboration needs to be more on that level, where students are collaborating with other students that might have resources that those students in Nigeria might not have, and so on and so forth. As I said, I'm from Adamawa State, and I understand the challenges in Adamawa State. My cousins live in Adamawa still, some of them. I want to see these solutions get to Adamawa State. Hands-on learning that involves collaboration with people from around the world. So let's make it as relatable as possible by teaching the history and by teaching the applications. If somebody on my team could please pull up the website, livingsensibly.org. Can you actually put the website in the chat? livingsensibly.org. I have a free book for all of you. It's under the books tab. Under that books tab, there's a book called Tools for Mastering Mathematics. I want to encourage you guys to check out that book. there's a chapter on teachers, and that chapter talks about how to make things more relatable to African students. Let me say one more thing for African students, please. The internet is a blessing, but the internet can also be a very bad thing. It could be a very bad thing where people don't know how to use it for good. So we have too many students that are Googling things that don't matter instead of looking up how to solve world problems. People are focused on maybe watching a lot of random things rather than watching videos about Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Isaac Newton, and how to change the world. And so I really want to encourage you guys to use the internet in that way for good. So.
Ah, look, I see your Facebook.
Questions, thoughts, comments?
Sorry, Mr. Amos, there's a question in the chat. I'll just read it to you. So Adewale Adelowo said, thank you for what you do, sir. I give it to you and your team. Thank you very much. How can we make science and mathematics more relatable and engaging for students in African schools, considering issues like infrastructure and other distractions in African society these days?
Thank you, Leo Joe. I think I touched on the first part of the way we deal with the
Yes.
infrastructural limits is the collaboration. So I think we need to do more collaboration. I think that books like Journey Through Genius, let's see if we can get books like this down to more schools and so on and so forth. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to switch one thing here. Okay. So I think we need more resources like Journey Through Genius as a way to inspire the teachers. So during our conference, hopefully someday, I think what would be cool is if the teachers, maybe you guys even come with some of, like you could have teachers do presentations about their experience of how they've been able to inspire their students. So I think that the movement that we're starting should involve teachers being a part of bringing those solutions to the students. And to other teachers, you know what I mean? A network. So I would love to see a network. And I came up with a word. I call it Vision Inspirational STEM Academy. Vision Inspirational STEM Academy, which is a network of teachers that use math and science to inspire their students to be the next top thinkers. Now, the distraction piece, we need to beg students to reduce the time they use on social media and increase the time exploring and learning about the greatest minds that have ever lived. I could tell you guys story after story. I'm not going to bore you on the stories on the history of science and math, but just know that there's enough material for us to keep talking about different aspects of science and math education. But why Africa is ripe is partly because we have a solid foundation, because of teachers like you all on this call. You guys provide students with a solid foundation. Number two, we have a faith element. Africa has a faith element in terms of there's a lot of people of faith in Africa. And believe it or not, the scientific revolution was connected to that element of faith. People believed that God made the world, so they wanted to study the world that God made. That's just the way it was. People wanted to study the world that God made. And if you think I'm making that up, you can look up the details of all the top scientists that have ever lived in the 1700s, and you find that most of them said, I want to study the world that God made. That's literally what they wanted to do. So Africa, we have that advantage. I believe we can raise the next generation of Newtons right out of Africa, and also Singapore, since Dr. Colin is here. We want to help in Singapore as well. Any other questions, thoughts, comments before we begin to land?
Okay. I'm very passionate about my kids. So you were talking about kids collaborating with students in other parts of the country. Say, for instance, a boy, I think you made an instance of someone in KD collaborating with someone in other countries where they have lights and trying to find a way of solving the problems of light issues in Nigeria. Do you have a way of creating a platform where schools can connect with schools or students to students such that that gap can be bridged?
I can say that we haven't built the platform for that, but we are more than willing to work on that. And we will. Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second. No, I said we will build that, God willing. My
This
team
one I told you
is
to make
also
it.
passionate.
Yes, yeah.
Give me 1 second.
But true. You said.
My team is very passionate about whatever we can do. So yes, we want to create a network of students and a network of schools. When I come to Nigeria in August, my hope and aspiration is that, so in August, God willing, when we come, I want to have teachers that have all gone through some of this training that can all come together in one place, if that makes sense. And so please stay tuned for that. I'll be working with the team to provide more information, and we would love to build a platform. We are open to suggestions. So Mr. Gaga, if you have any suggestions for us on that, we want to build that collaborative system. Because here's what's happening. So in business, notice that, again, I talk about interdisciplinary, right? Dr. Colin Gann and I are working on a project, and we're bringing in, we have Dr. Colin Gann and I, there's a gentleman named May Nasara who will be joining us as well, and then Joseph Ago in Nigeria, and Elia Joe. We're working on a project that involves bringing water purification systems to people. And the way we do that is we're going to teach our students about math, physics, chemistry, business, marketing, and all of those pieces in solving a problem. The reason why I bring that up is, your students could definitely give us insights into that. But when I think of the schools coming together, I think we can have more impact if we all come together with schools. So your school, for example, would be one of those schools, hopefully, that we can partner with, and we want to invite other schools to come along. We want to change curriculum and help people in their schools or update their curriculum, but we also want to unite. We want to come together and collaborate as much as possible. I hope that answers some of that question. Some of it is under construction. Let's just say that, Ms. Gaga.
So sorry, I wanted to add a little about that because, we had, before we started this whole training, we had actually began building the framework for a system like that where students could relate with students and even other mentors that we were trying to recruit for students to work under and do projects with and things like that. So that's just like what Mr. Amos said, it's definitely under construction. It's something that we are building the framework for, but we definitely are very open to your suggestions and anything else you feel we might need to add to this platform.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Over to you, Mr. Amos.
So let me just ask one more question to the teachers. If you don't mind, are there more practical ways that you could see your job, sort of, if there's a word I could use for it, how can we better serve you as an organization in raising the next generation of scientists and thinkers? Or what are some ways you found to spark the light and the interest and excitement in your students, if you don't mind sharing for a second?
All right, thank you, Mr. Amos. That was very wonderful and educative session already. We found that you've actually explored a lot of this, and then thinking of you bringing philosophy, logic into all of this. Right here, some of the things we did in university, relating them with science, and then some of us actually attend to primary school pupils, not necessarily the secondary school. And then you have spoken a lot. We enjoyed the session, and we're already thinking pictures with all that you've said, and assuming that is just what we needed to do to actually achieve the aim for this particular training. I think you've said more as it relates to the pupils. We can actually relate what you've said and then bring them up to a standard where they're just not being maybe just within Africa alone, but global citizens, like being able to actually affect their world. And I wish to say that we would like to partner with you or probably collaborate with you with Safe and Schools, and then touching as regards to curriculum as well. So I really want to say it's a good job. I appreciate everything you said. The team, you guys are doing a great job. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know this is what it's all about, but it's just mind blowing. And I want to say, well done. You're doing a great job, sir, and more grace, sir.
Thank you so much for your encouragement. The one thing I was going to mention there, and then we'll land our plane, except any other comments come, but we'll land it, and then we'll let you guys know in advance if it's okay to have a part 2 check-in, and even just some practical takeaways. There's something in business they call blue ocean strategy. And there's a man by the name of Jensen Huang. I'll put it in the chat, or if Dr. Colin wants to put it in the chat, he can too. Jensen Huang. Jensen Huang is the CEO of a company called NVIDIA or NVIDIA. That's how some people might know it. But Jensen Huang, I put it in the chat now. He jokes and he says that he doesn't like competition sometimes. He wants to go somewhere and start new markets. And part of what he would say is, if you have a problem that nobody's even looking to solve that problem, and then you go there and you solve that problem, then again, you have the ocean there is not touched in one sense. The world is not touched. So what the Learning Institute for Excellence has done with Counting to Calculus, we want to use a blue ocean strategy to support teachers. And here's what I mean. I am very passionate about raising top scientists and mathematicians, but I also am very passionate about raising top thinkers. So the way I put it is, I want to raise the next generation of scientists and mathematicians and engineers who also know the history and philosophy of science, logic, and philosophy. And what would be interesting there is to realize, what is my example that I'm using to raise the next generation of scientists? Well, as I've studied the top scientists in books like Journey Through Genius, what I've found is that a lot of them actually knew philosophy, logic, theology, history. They knew other things other than just science. So in Nigeria, when you're in science class, you don't take history. So you don't understand that history affects science. In 1871, there was a war that Germany and France fought. When Germany won that war, you look at Germany after 1871, what do you notice? Albert Einstein, Max Planck, I could go on and on. Why are the top scientists of German origin in that era? Because Germany had won the war and they had the resources, right? So there's a connection between history and science in seeing what created the atmosphere for scientific discovery. However, Germany did not have, I would say, the theological framework anymore. And so today, some people are actually saying that we don't see the top scientists like we used to see anymore. There's something missing. And I think what's missing is that rigor of interdisciplinary understanding of science, philosophy, logic. So our blue ocean strategy is counting to calculus, in the sense that we are bringing math, chemistry, physics, computer science, engineering, and business, and putting them in the same bucket. We're not separating them out. We want to teach it in that regard. So what are some takeaways for the teachers? Number one, I know teachers are busy, and I'm not, going to give you homework. So, but I would say, if you don't mind, find a mathematician or a physicist or somebody that you would like to study. Let us know how we can provide you with the resources to study more of that person. Of course, you have the internet, but let's say you wanted to do more of a book study on a scientific figure. We do have people on the ground in Nigeria. Let's see how we can get you those resources so that you can enrich your knowledge on the history and philosophy of science. So that's number one, is that let's encourage teachers to grow in a passion for that. Number two, let's encourage the applications to be taught. Can we tell our students why they're learning what they're learning as best as we can before we simply dissect the topic? Number three, let's do projects. How can we give them projects that apply the concepts that they're learning? For example, we help some students to start a store. I'm just going to pull up, here's an example. Teaching students about money and making change by helping them start a school store or some sort of store where they are exchanging money and seeing how money works, decimals, and how fractions can work in measuring cups for baking. And they bake a cake and they eat the cake. Maybe not a cake. That's not the healthiest thing to do. But maybe they I'm joking, but maybe they bake a cake or cookies. Let's teach them the fractions with a hands-on approach. Now, this might take time, but let's start the journey. And I think that's one way we can go about it. So that's what I was going to say, is that counting to calculus is basically providing the historical and application context for learning every math topic that kids have to learn. That's what I think would be helpful in our next quest. So stay tuned for more information on that. I will hand it over to Elia Joe as we land our plane. And May Nasara, sorry, do you want to jump in? I wanted to introduce May Nasara. Are you on the call? Okay, I'll let Elia Joe go ahead. Sorry. Elia Joe, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Amos. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We're really happy with all the questions that we received. We're also happy that a lot of you said you were able to learn a lot from this session, and it really just gives us more passion for what we do and helps us know that we're definitely on the right direction in terms of what we're trying to achieve. So sorry if there's noise behind me. I do have some announcements for us just before we leave. So we're trying to make this a monthly thing, where although for now it's going to be quarterly, but we will definitely get back to everyone if this teacher training is going to be a monthly thing. But for now, just like what Mr. Amos, sorry, just give me a second. So just like what Mr. Amos said, it's going to be quarterly for now. We will be sending out emails with the next topics and the next dates so that you can sign up, or if you have any other teachers that might be interested in these trainings, other schools that would want to join us on our journey, please definitely tell them about what we're doing at Life and Amos, the math guy. We really appreciate your support in terms of, sharing our message around the world. We can't do this alone. We need a network of schools to build this program to the level that we're trying to get it to. So we'll really appreciate you sharing our work. And then Mr. Amos spoke about the counting to calculus. I also spoke a bit about the counting to calculus, sorry. And that counting to calculus workbook will soon be available for purchase. Again, that would be communicated to everyone in due time via email. Using this webinar, we're able to collect everybody's email, so we will be sending out emails very soon. Sorry, I have something in my throat, which is causing a bit of problem with my voice. But a survey will also be sent out immediately after this or very soon. And we would really appreciate it if you feel that survey, because it will really help us know, okay, this is the level of understanding you were able to have after this class, and it will help us know which areas to improve on for the next one. Then beginning January 2025, we will be launching training sessions tailored specifically to your students. So this is not only something we do for teachers, we are very passionate about also training students and helping them understand calculus and giving them the tools in order to have a very, very successful STEM career. And the plans are underway for a STEM camp for students. So Mr. Amos spoke briefly about, Cambridge and his visit to Cambridge, and I'm excited to say that he's also planning to take these students to Cambridge and even possibly collaborate with some professors there, build projects, just a 2-week thing where your students will be able to learn as much as possible about, the giant of science, Isaac Newton, and other great professors that came from the beautiful campus of Cambridge. So again, all of these things will be communicated very soon via email, or even if you follow us on our YouTube, if you look for us, Amos the Math Guy, on social media, you see what we're doing there. So please do well to follow us. Everything we've spoken about, we will send in an email very, very soon. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate you joining. It was a very, very exciting session with all of you. And I just want to say lovely bye-bye. Except Mr. Amos has anything else to add, I will be I will say, okay, we can end now. Mr. Amos, do you have anything else?
So we would love to, as I said, issue some certificates of, sort of, you've participated in attending. Now, of course, what I would love to do, and I'll send this later, is I would love to get, just a series of quick questions answered and then that would just go with your certificate. So I can show some outcomes. So let me explain what I mean. Number one is just having a general overview of when did the scientific revolution happen. Number two is just listing a few of these scientists. But what I want to do, this first one is going to be very basic, I promise. What I want to do is these webinars will come with certain certificates of completion, and it would be a way for you to show, people that I have attended a Counter to Calculus webinar. I have learned about the history of science and mathematics. And please, those who teach English and history, we're not forgetting you. We need history. We need English. So all of you, all the educators, we want you to be able to show people that, hey, I've attended and I have proof. God willing, down the road, my hope is that it will become a new normal where teachers are going to say, I attended a Counter to Calculus, and people will begin to beg you to teach them about the history of math, because you will know that history and you will be able to provide it to them. Of course, you do it with humility. So lastly, I'll just say this. I will, one of my graphic designers and helpers, Joseph. Joseph, are you on the call as well? I don't know if Joseph is on the call. I was going to have him say a word on this.
Don't worry, you got this.
Okay, let me just say this. If Joseph, if you unmute, I'll stop. But basically, this book called Counter to Calculus is there's 3 books in the series. I'll send a few to your school, so you guys have it in your library, and then you guys can see the workbook. But basically, if I give you these books, they will show you how to go from basic math all the way to calculus. So I'll send a set to Safe Hands School. And then when again, my hope and aspiration and prayer, my hope is that we can meet in person next year, August, God willing. But Cambridge, we're hoping for the 1st to the 10th of August. So if you know some people that are thinking of what to do for their holiday next year, tell them to keep Cambridge in mind. I would love to meet as many people there as possible to show them around and maybe take them to Isaac Newton's house as well. That's all I have.
I'm interested.
Yeah, sorry?
I'm interested.
Okay.
I'm very interested in seeing you there.
Okay, yes. So please, if you're interested on that, make sure you give us your email. Yeah, we have your email. We'll let you guys know. Let us know. And then I will talk with British Airways. I've talked with American Airlines, so we booked a group from American Airlines before, but I want to see what British Airways can do for us. So Elia Joe and you tell me, Nasser, and all of us, let's talk to British Airways and say, please support our Counter to Calculus team. Bring them from Abuja to London. So let's be praying towards it. I believe that it is very possible. So, well, thank you so much. If it's okay, can we try to connect in January again? I'm sorry, February, in the second month.
Okay.
Okay, and then I will get the curriculum. My first step for your school is I just need to get the scope and sequence and the curriculum that you guys use right now. So please, amosthemathguy@gmail.com is where I've sent my email. It's right here. Let's keep the conversation going. I would love to start reviewing the curriculum, and then we can hopefully, by this time next year, by God's grace, I would love to see your math curriculum becoming the gold standard for Nigeria, hopefully. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, God bless you all. Take care.
Thank you
Okay,
so
take care,
much.
everyone. Thank you again.
Take care. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I've left my email and WhatsApp information. So thanks again.